On October the 15th, 16 New Zealanders, half of them Maori, were arrested in a major operation using 300 police officers. The police suggested they were terrorists meeting in the mountains to plan attacks on New Zealand soil. Maori groups say they were practicing traditional bushcraft and hunting. And now the government has said it will not, after all, bring any charges under the Terrorism Suppression Act. I'm Tamor Nabili, and on this edition of 101 East, we look at the storm brewing in New Zealand. The use of the new anti-terror legislation in a domestic context has proved controversial. Across New Zealand, Maori demonstrators took to the streets to protest the manner of the arrests, and critics predict the reopening of old wounds will do more harm than good to New Zealand's race relations. Fauzia Ibrahim reports.
They're traditionally known as the proud warrior people. And nowhere is Maori culture and history more embodied than in the Tuhoi tribe. Known as Children of the Mist, many of the Tuhoi people shun urban life, preferring to live in isolated communities on their sacred ground here in the Urewera National Park. The people remain bitter over the colonial confiscation of their land, which led to what they call a history of oppression. Some say that on October 15, 2007, history repeated itself. Anti-terror police raided homes across the country, arresting 17 people, including environmentalists, peace activists and Maori sovereignty campaigners. According to some sources, several were linked to an alleged plot to assassinate Prime Minister Helen Clark.
This operation had nothing to do with targeting Maori or Tuhoi or any other ethnic group. This was solely about individuals who we believed had broken the law. This is about evidence pointing towards unlawful acts, which we gathered over a period of time and which we took legal advice about.
Police accused the suspects of training in the use of firearms and explosives in military-style camps in Tuhoi country. We visited one such remote camp in the Urewera National Park, accessible only on horseback or speedboat. Our guide told us this rundown shack is a whare wananga, or house of learning, visited by hundreds of Maoris throughout the year.
Whare wananga is our institution that, where we teach, learn our esoteric knowledge. We come here, we learn about our histories, our traditions, rituals, about our lands, about our ancestors.
Then where would someone get the idea that this could be a terrorist training camp?
Well, we live in the forest. Firearms are a pretty normal part of our life. In that we're all hunters, we all come from hunting families. We come out here into the forest to hunt animals, deer, pigs, so on. So I guess it would be, one could make that assumption that there's a connection to terrorist camps and hunting, but I think that's quite an over-exaggeration.
Among the frequent visitors to the camp is outspoken Tuhoi sovereignty campaigner Tame Iti. He was arrested during the police raids.
My father is not a terrorist. He's an easy target. He wears his heritage on his face, and it's something that Middle New Zealand focus on in terms of what is the thing that they're most afraid of. New Zealanders are afraid of the ugly underbelly of where all of this comes from. They don't like the idea that this country that we live in has been built on colonialism, that at some stage during our history there's been a government that's taken land, that's murdered people, that has been unjust.
New Zealand Solicitor General ruled against charging the suspects under the Terrorism Suppression Act, saying the laws were too complex. All 16, however, still face firearms charges. But the raids have angered some Maoris who see the police operation as continued targeted oppression of the whole community.
It's about power and control. I feel the government is slacking, thinking that their grip around Tuhoi is loosening. Pull the chain, eh? Show them who's boss. Use whatever means you have to use to maintain control over this situation.
Many Maori feel the problems they face today stem from past injustices and a lack of respect and recognition of who they are.
If the state and the New Zealand community recognise us as tangata whenua, as people of this land, as Indigenous people with the ability to be able to do things and get on with things for ourselves with a vested interest in it, then it'll be a hell of a lot easier for us to move forward.
Although they are 14% of the population, Maori make up nearly half the total prison population. They lag behind in education, health and employment. Drug and alcohol problems compound Maori poverty. Some feel Maori sovereignty is the solution to the community's problems. For some, that means the complete return of confiscated land so tribal identity and pride can be restored. For others, it is a separate governing system tailored to the indigenous needs of Aotearoa or New Zealand.
And what we're talking about is the ability for us to manage our own affairs in a way that we believe is appropriate for us within our tribal nations, and yet seeing the overview of Aotearoa.
Why can't that happen now, under the government?
Well, that's it, because it's under the government. And the government says, go left, you go left. We are almost at the behest of government agencies, and it's been proven over our history that that has never worked and not likely to work.
The majority of Maori in New Zealand are actually middle-class, ordinary New Zealanders who get on with their life and shut their mouth. There is an element of Maori who don't like their lot and don't like the systems and don't like the processes that other Maori have taken advantage of and use the past as their justification for doing nothing in the future. Those people are not constructive, they are negative, and I don't see any scenario where they would be happy with anything.
There is, however, quiet commendation for the government's efforts to address the issue of confiscated lands. Since the 1990s, several Maori tribes have received monetary compensation or a share of resource revenues. But for some, the process does nothing to erase the pain of colonial history. Others, however, say it's time to shake off the shackles of history and look ahead.
I think Māori, if they put their mind to it, will be one of the fastest transitioning Indigenous groups of people in the world, even if there are different political persuasions, because we're smart enough to do that, but we do have the negative sides of us which we have to work at. You know, I think we've got a fantastic future.
New Zealand as we know it today is 160 years old. It is still a relatively young nation. Aotearoa's challenge is to confront its past in order to build a bright future. As the Maori proverb goes, care for the land, care for the people, go forward.
I'm joined in the studio today by Maori Party MP Honi Harawira and by Tracy McIntosh, who's of Tuhoi descent. She's from Auckland University. We're also joined from Wellington by Ron Mark, MP for the New Zealand First Party, and you saw him moments ago in that film. Honi, let me begin with you. Are the Maori turning to terrorism?
No. The state is turning to terrorism to keep us under control, as was amply expressed by Bull and by Te Ururo Flavel. It seems clear that the rights to Maori land, rights that Maori actively want to pursue, it seems equally clear that the state is not of a mind to allow us to continue.
That's a provocative counter-accusation, but my question is, are the Maori beginning to turn to terrorist tactics to fight the battle that you have just outlined?
No, I'm not. No, Maori people are not. They have been engaged in this struggle in exactly the same way for more than 150 years. Back in the 1800s, they used to call us savages and rebels. Those terms are now not quite PC any longer. The new term seems to be terrorists, but the struggle remains exactly the same. The struggle for self-determination, the struggle for the return of land, and the struggle for Maori to be able to exercise their rights to self-determination.
Ron Mark, you said in that film that they should shut their mouths and get on with their lives. Is that the role of a citizen as you see it?
No, I actually didn't quite say that. I said that there are many Māori, the vast majority of whom are middle class, who simply get on about their lives, earn a living, educate their children and shut their mouths. And what I meant by that is that they don't take part in some of the rhetoric and they don't agree with some of the things that have been said by people such as Hone and his cohorts. The fact is that...
But is speaking their minds necessarily something wrong?
Let's be clear, I'm of Ngāti Porou descent. Try getting any Ngāti Porou person not to speak their mind. They have a proud history of that. But some of the rhetoric and some of the romanticism and some of the nonsense that you've just heard from Hone, they absolutely do not believe in, they do not support. And their way of dealing with their own kind, who say things that they simply don't agree with, is actually silence. They will not openly. There are many leaders. What's clear is many of the leaders who have expressed their views privately about what's happened and what we're hearing from the Māori Party and Hone in particular. They express those comments, those views in-house and amongst their own, but they don't express those views publicly.
Let's be clear about one thing. 16 people have been arrested on anti-terrorist legislation. Why is it that all of a sudden we are having a conversation about whether Maoris are resorting to terrorism?
One of my real concerns is the way that dissent is being criminalised and the way that we've moved from seeing particular types of activities in a different framework. And what I'm very concerned about is the possibility of now always seeing it through this framework, through this terrorist framework. So types of activities, as Hone has noted, these are, there's been a very long history of resistance, there's been a very long history of struggle that's been articulated in many different forms. And I think what we've seen is this move towards seeing some of those activities perhaps understood through this sort of this gaze, this terrorist gaze.
The idea that there are Maoris training as terrorists in the hills is what we're basically talking about. What's your perspective on that?
First of all, I think we need to clear something up. 16 people were charged with terrorism. Those charges have been thrown out by the second top lawyer in the country on the basis that none of those charges could stand up under the Terrorism Act. The Act is unworkable, complicated and incoherent. Those are the words of the Solicitor General himself. So those charges are gone. Secondly, in terms of what those people are doing up in the Urewera, if it becomes a matter of for the court to deal with, then let it be dealt with by the court. I'm surprised, however, to find out that somebody from the Crown side has released all of the documents that they took off computers, released it to the media, and the media put it out in the open. So it seems the media have decided to conduct this trial in the court of public opinion.
Well, let's get to the basis of the charges. Ron, you just disagreed with that analysis.
The charges have been thrown out.
Look, firstly, there were no charges laid. There were no charges laid. Hone's totally wrong. Charges were not laid. The process is such that the application to be allowed to lay those charges was placed appropriately so by the police to the Solicitor General, who looked at the case and said, no, I'm not giving you authorisation to lay those charges. So there's a difference between that and what Hone's just said. But how do we get to this point? Isn't it a semantic difference? We get to this point because some people... Well, no, it's a procedural and very clear procedural difference. I mean, you've got to have charges laid for the courts to be able to hear it. But in this case, with this, the extra protection that's put in place means that those charges can't be laid in the first instance without authority and approval from the Solicitor General. So we didn't get to that point, and the other charges will be laid under the Firearms Act, and they will be dealt with. But why are we at this point? We're at this point because we have a group of people training with AK-47s, military-style semi-automatic weapons, practicing rehearsing drills to ambush vehicles, practicing the manufacture and the use of explosive devices, practicing and talking of killing people for practice.
Well, hold on, Ron. Where's the evidence for this? If the charges are not going to be brought, what is the evidence for these charges?
No, this is unreal for Ron Knight to be talking about the rule of law and then to be putting out all of the stuff that he's picked up through the newspapers and through the media, which was released illegally by the Crown. Right. Now, clearly, if this stuff is going to go to court,
well, it wasn't released by the Crown,
and police are going to be charged.
You're unable to say who
under the
released
Firearms Act. Then let the courts make that decision.
All right. Well,
you should leave that alone. And if we come back to the issue about whether or not there are acts of terrorism going on, if terror, as it's defined by the United Nations,
is the exercise of force to terrorise a population, then that's exactly what happened in Tūhoe when those black garb ninjas busted in and blockaded the whole community, arrested people, abused people, scared children, and held people without bail.
Okay, well, I want to pursue the fundamental question here of, one, whether the activities that were being described actually took place, because we have no evidence for that as yet, and secondly, why it was that terror legislation is necessary in this context. We'll do that in just a minute. We're going to have to take a short break. We'll be back very shortly. Stay with us.